Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we are by the Gemara, Daf Kavhe Amud Aleph, 6 lines down from where the white lines start, basically the beginning of the Gemara. Today's Amud is being learned as a Schut Rufah Shelma for Rachel Simcha Bad Nahid, Daniel Moshe Ben Frangis Avraham, Binyamin Madrina, Kela Bad Nazis, Galid Bad Yafa, Levi Alevi Ben Leah. That should all have Refuah Shelema, Amen. Someone is also being learned. Leilui Nishmat, Harav Ezra David ben Rav Naftali Alevi, Rav Moshe Yisraeli ben Harav Binyamin, Hauer, and Shaheen Bat Yehuda. The Shabbat should have an aliyah. Be'ezrat Hashem, this month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shea family. It should be an ultimate schud for their mishpacha. Amen. So we saw some fascinating stories in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, that the Gemara is going to actually allude on and expand on. This is the last piece of the Gemara in the second parak, the last piece of astronomy of the Masechta as well. The interesting part that we saw was the dispute between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, that Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinas, they disagreed with Rabban Gamliel. This is Rabban Gamliel the Yavne, the grandson of Rabban Gamliel Azaken, and he had a cheshbon. He made the Kiddush HaChodesh a day earlier than they expected, and Rabbi Dosa bar Harkina said, "I can't believe this, Edim. No way, and no way that this is a valid edut." The Mishnah says it. They came and said, "We saw it on its time, and at night, if it was seen the night before, you would expect to see it, and it's a clear sky, and you saw nothing." And Rabban Gamliel said, "But we still accept it." And the previous day was actually Rosh Hashanah. This is the Chodesh Elul going to Tishrei. And Rabbi Dosa bar Harkina said, "There's no way." Kiblan Rabban Gamliel accepted these edim, and Rabbi Dosa bar Harkina said, "Ed sheker, and these are definitely liars." And he said the example for it is like edim come and say, this woman that was pregnant gave birth, and then tomorrow she comes in and she has a big stomach of a 9-month pregnant woman. So obviously they lied. And this is the same thing, said Rabbi Dosa bar Harkinas. Meidim ala isha she'alda ulmachar keresa ben shinea. Amar lo Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says to Rabbi Dosa bar Harkinas, he says, you're right. I hold like you. Now this was leaked to Rabban Gamliel. Rabbi Yeshua is in the Beit Midrash of Rabban Gamliel, together with all the other chevra, Rabbi Akiva, all of them, Rabbi Azariah, everyone was there. And Rabban Gamliel did not take this sitting. Shalach lo Rabban Gamliel, he said, "Gozrani alecha shtavo etzli b'makelcha u'ma'otecha b'yom ha'kippurim shcha liyot b'cheshboncha." So you know what? Your Yom Kippurim is going to be a day later. It's going to be, according to me, Motzei Yom Kippur. So I'm going to make a gezerah on you that you're going to take your wallet and your staff, everything, and walk to me to Yavneh, to my place on Yom Kippur that's in your cheshbon, to show everyone publicly that day that you think you said it's Yom Kippur, it's really not Yom Kippur, right? Now we'll see soon how difficult this must have been for Rabbi Yeshua. So what he did was, he comes in contact with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva finds him. We'll see in the Gemara what that exactly means. That he was sad. Amalo, he tells him, he says, Yeshli lilmod. He says, I could tell you a learning, a drasha, that anything that Rabbi Gamliel did, halachically binding. So you have nothing to worry about. I understand that you have your own cheshbon, but halachically speaking, once he paskid it, he's the legitimate betin. That is considered the halacha, and you have nothing to worry about. The fact that you have your own cheshbon and you, essentially disagree with his validity of the edut that he accepted and based upon which he was mekadesh the chodesh, you are fine still. And what's the learning that I'm going to say? Ele moadei Hashem mikra kodesh asher tikro otam bemoadam. When it says Ele moadei Hashem mikra kodesh asher tikro otam ben bizmanan ben shlo bizmanan. Even if it's not on time, still is going to be mikra kodesh when it's asher tikro otam bemoadam. When the bedin calls it, that becomes the actual day of the Yom Tov. So says the Mishnah, Eni moadot ela elu. Hashem says, I don't have any other moadim but these ones that the Betin announced. Balo etzer Rabbi Dosa ben Harkila. Rabbi Yeshua still said, he goes to the Baal Memra, the one that started this whole ruckus was Rabbi Dosa ben Harkila. This is the one that disagreed with Rabbi Gamliel and said, these are Edes Sheker. And he also gives him some Musa Shmuz. Amar lo, im ba'in anu ladun achar bedino shel Rabbi Gamliel. If we want to start judging what the psak of Rabbi Gamliel was after the fact, I mean before the fact, okay, you could talk. It's in learning before. But once he paskined, if you're going to go back and try to judge whether he was correct or incorrect, then we have to go back and check every bedin, said Rabbi Dosa bar Harkinas. And he darshins it also from a pasuk, Shenemar, Ve'al Moshe V'Aaron Nadav Avihu. Says, mentions when they go on top of Har Sinai, he mentions Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, the four, V'shiv'im Ziknei Yisrael, and the 70 elders. Who were the 70 elders? Nobody knows. Ve'lama lo nitparashu shemotan. Why does the pasuk deliberately cover their names? Says the Mishnah, Ela le'named shekol shlosha u'shlosha sha'amdu bedin al Yisrael, any three dayanim that stand as an official bedin in any generation, any given generation, harehu kebedino shel Moshe. It has the validity of bedin. Obviously, we realize the Yeridat HaDorot. We realize that the generations closer to Har Sinai are, more, they're given more credence. But when it comes to the action of bedin, the validity of the actions of a bedin is equated between the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, his own bedin that Moshe Rabbeinu sat on, together with Nadav, Avihu, and Aaron, to the bedin of any given generation, any three that they are officially part of the bedin, that they sit in that generation. That's going to be Rabbi Bedino Shel Moshe. This is what Rabbi Dosa ben Harkina said to calm the nerves of Rabbi Yeshua. So the Mishnah said, obviously, in the day Motzei Yom Kippur, which would have been Yom Kippur according to his cheshbon, he took his makel, his money, all of that, and he went to Yavne, to Rabbi Gamliel. And Rabbi Gamliel, was very fair about it. He gets up for him, his kavod. He comes ahead, he gives him a kiss on his forehead, and he calls him Bobe Shalom, Rebbe, the Talmidi, he calls him his Rebbe. He says, you're my Rebbe in Chochmah, and the only way that you're my Talmid is because you, despite the fact that you're my Rebbe, Chochmah, you listen to me still. Unbelievable display of humility and anava. But nevertheless, we promised to speak about this, right? We promised to speak about this story, and that's why we read it again in the onset of the shiur. So we're going to try to quickly go through the Gemara, finish the perek, and come back to this point and talk about the three stories that eventually caused the untimely forced resignation of Rabban Gamliel, this being the first story. This is the first element that eventually, after a year, caused his forced resignation. We'll come back to this. Be'ez Hashem. Says the Gemara. Tanya Amar Rabbi Gamliel Chachamim. Now, the Mishnah started which we didn't really read, the first line of the Mishnah, in Chavtar Amud Bet, that there was a story that the two Edim came, and they said, well, we saw the moon in the morning, and we saw it in the afternoon. We saw it in the morning in the Mizrach, we saw it in the afternoon in the Marav. And Rabbi Gamliel accepted it, even though the other people were very surprised by it. How can you see the same moon so fast? It goes from Mizrach to Marav. Then you can see it in the morning, the new moon, and you can see the same new moon in the afternoon. That's a surprise. And Rabbi Gamliel explains over here his tam. Now, back then, we mentioned from the Rambam, in the Mishnah, we mentioned from the Rambam says that Rabbi Gamliel had his own cheshbonot. He knew that tonight has to be Rosh Chodesh, right? He knew from other cheshbonot, and he accepted the edim. And as we see, he explained a reason that, according to Rambam, may not be the main reason, but he has to explain, anyways, the surprising fact that they claim to have seen the moon in the morning in the Mizrach and in the evening time in the Ma'arav. He still has to explain that, right? So the explanation he offered was, I have a tradition from my great-grandfather. My grandfather, it literally translated as my grandfather, that actually those who say this is a reference to Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken, who was actually his grandfather. And there are those who say, usually, when the Mishpacha of David HaMelech, they say, we have a tradition from Bet Avi Abba. We explained this in Masechet Brachot, Daf Yud, for those who remember, when Chizkiyahu HaMelech said to Yeshaya Navi when he was sick, he said, Ben Amos, Kaleh Nevuatcha V'seh, he basically respectfully kicked him out of the palace. He said, I have a tradition, mi Bet Avi Abba. Who was that? David HaMelech. So usually it's reference to David HaMelech. Here also there are those who say this is a reference to David HaMelech, but others mention that this is exactly Avi Abba, my grandfather, the Rabbi Gamliel, the first. And what's the tradition? Sometimes the moon takes the long scenic route, and sometimes it is the pattern of the Levana, sometimes is shorter than others. It's not the same as an exact pattern that would be always the same. So sometimes when it's the Ktsara, Baba Ktsara, then you could actually have it in the morning there and in the afternoon in the opposite side, in Mizrach in the morning, in Ma'arav in the evening time, and that's the explanation he gave. Now, Meiri brings this Rambam, but Meiri at the end writes in the name of the Yerushalmi that this actually was the reason that Rabbi Gamliel, it was not that he was just giving an excuse for his cheshbon, but this actually was part of his actual cheshbon as well. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my tabad the Rebbe, what is the reason of Rebbe or Rabbi Gamliel over here? Dichtiv, as it says, Asay yareach lemoadim, shemesh yadam mevo. The pasuk says shemesh yadam mevo. The shemesh is the one, sun is the one that has a set pattern of an orbit, but the moon not as much. It doesn't have as set of an orbit as the shemesh. So says the Gemara. Shemesh udi adam mevo, yareach lo yadam mevo. Rabbi Chia Chazia lesiara de hava kai besafra de 29. Rabbi Chia sees the moon in the morning time of the 29th day. Now this needs a little bit of a background. This was the 29th day of Elul. We remember, all of us, that we said me'olam lo ra'inu Elul me'ubar. They would be very specific, especially the Gemara in Daf Chaf, especially when the cheshbon would have landed on Yom Kippur being next to Shabbat, if you would have a Elul Maleh. If you would have a full Elul, a 30-day Elul, and then Rosh Hashanah would fall next to Shabbat, then what would have happened? If someone dies, Chas v'Shalom, Shabbat, not Rosh Hashanah, sorry, Shabbat and Yom Kippur. If someone dies on Shabbat, or Erev Shabbat, right before Shkia, and then you go into Shabbat and you go to Yom Kippur right afterwards, or vice versa, Yom Kippur and Shabbat, then that would be a bizayon for the Met, and so on. We spoke about this. So this was a scenario of such. So he really wants to be Mekadesh the Chodesh tonight. And Rav Chia is looking at this Levana in the morning. He's like, wait a second, how are we going to do this? If people are going to see this tonight, Yeah, and then it's like there's no way that in the morning you see it, in the night we had a whole thing that between the old moon and the new moon, it's 24 hours that no one sees it, right? It's a problem. It can't be seen right now because we mentioned Daf Chaf, right? We had to explain, and we may take some more time to explain further how is it that the Gemara said, Me'aymin ala edim. You would even pressure the edim to say they saw the new moon when they didn't see it, in order to make this happen, that Rosh Hashanah would not fall in a way that Yom Kippur and Shabbat would be combined next to each other, right? So he's really desperate. Says, tonight has to be Rosh Hashanah. You can't be here, right? You can't be seen for the duration of the day. And therefore, he's like having a conversation with the moon. He takes a little piece of dirt, he throws it at the Levara. Obviously, the Rambam says this is just the frustration of himself, talking to himself. But he says, Shakar kala patak be. He throws this thing. He says, Le'urta ba'ina lekadushi bach. Tonight, we need to be Mekadesh you, right? And you standing here? Right? Get away. He tells the moon. Zil ichsi. Go cover yourself. Rabbi tells Rabbi Chia, obviously what happened was that night Edim didn't come. And this is one of those classic moments that you would actually pressure the Edim. So he says to him, if I'm going to Mekadesh the Chodesh year, people are going to be speaking behind my back from now until Mashiach comes because the people saw the moon, didn't see the moon. He says, you go to the next city, right? There, perhaps people did not see during the day. Go to Ein Tav, v'kadashe leyarcha. Try to get the Edim. If you find Edim, if not, you do what you need to do to pressure the Edim. And be Mekadesh the Chodesh, and then send me a sign, a siman, that you were Mekadesh the Chodesh. This way, I'm also going to be Mekadesh the Chodesh here, and Al pi shnayim edim yakum davar, then there will be no renun of people speaking behind the bedin, right? Shalach lesimana, what would be the siman that you're going to send me? David melech Yisrael chai v'chayam, right? Now, why David? Now, we're not so surprised because we say this by Kiddush HaChodesh, right? David melech Yisrael chai v'chayam, when we say Birkat HaLevana, but, so it's part of our experience of the new moon, so to speak. But really, the reason for it would be, as Rashi explains over here, David melech Yisrael chai v'kayam, because nimshal kalevana. The pasuk in Tehillim says, Kis'o keshemesh negdi kayareach ikon olam. Right? David melech was nimshal lelevana. Therefore, just like levana is simulated to David, you say David melech Yisrael chai v'kayam, and I'll get it that you were Mekadesh the Chodesh. I could announce it here that you did that over there as well. I'm not alone, and that's that. Now, Rivan writes the reason that David melech is nimshal levana is a deeper sense. The Vilna Gaon writes that David melech was the 14th generation to Malchut, but David was from the dynasty of Yehuda, that's 14th generation. So just like the 14th day, the moon is in a full moon, and David melech's Malchut also grew bigger and bigger and never was diminished afterwards. That's David melech Yisrael chai v'kayam. You could say much more Torah in the comparison that you have between the moon and David melech. Obviously, we also mentioned in Masechet Sukkah ourselves over here in this Chaburat HaKadishata over here that Klal Yisrael is compared to Levana, the projection of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be Or LaGoyim and so on. And David melech became the vessel of Klal Yisrael, that connection, the regular Revi'iyah of the Merkava. So he became Nimshal La Levana because the Lev Melech and Lev Ha'am is very much the same. Again, Rivan, other Rishonim say other insights into this. Not for now. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, Pamachad Nitkashu Shamayim Be'avim. There was one time that you had a cloudy sky, and the people saw a dmut levana, an image of a levana, on the 29th day. Rosh Chodesh, they thought, oh, we saw the Levana, okay, so it's a little meunan, a little cloudy, but we saw it. And Bedin wanted to be Mekadesh the Chodesh. Now, we already spoke about seeing the Levana through the clouds and so on and so forth. Amar lahem Rabbi Gamliel, Kach mekubal mibeit Avi Abba. Rabbi Gamliel said, can't be. It's not the time for it yet. Why not? Because I have a tradition, says Rabbi Gamliel. En chidusha shel Levana pekuta me-29 yom umechetze. It can't be a new cycle. Every cycle of the Levana has to be minimum of 29 days and a half, right? That means 12 hours. Ushne shlishi sha'ah, and 2/3 of an hour, 20 minutes. Ve'ayin gimel chalakim, and 73 chalakim. Now, every chalak is not a second, but it's 3.33333333 seconds, right? So that altogether, the way we know it is 29 days and a half and tashsak chalakim. Okay, that's the easier way to say it. Now, this is actually for those who saw the group messaging last night. We shared the fact that NASA, the article that was written, many of them are there, but something very, very interesting that the number of the fraction of the day, right? The fraction of the day that you have, it will be to the 10,000th of the day, exactly the same cheshbon that NASA found out, just 2/10,000th of a second off the cheshbon of NASA, and NASA did this, and 2 years later the Germans did it, and they came 1/10,000th closer to the cheshbon of Chazal. And one of the I think it was one of the American astronomers. He wrote a paper because somebody showed him this Gemara actually of Rosh Hashanah Daf Chaf Amud Aleph fame, and he was flabbergasted. He wrote a paper saying this is not possible. There's no way that somebody 2,000 plus years ago knew such a thing, and so on and so forth. Again, obviously these are that side, he made it to Hidabrut and so on and so forth. There are those who brought, to claiming, on the other end that this maybe was known to the science of the time, not maybe science, but to the common belief. And the question is where it came from. Is it from us? Is it not from us? Was this from the time of Adam Arishon or not? Okay, a lot of fascinating back and forth. But again, recognize that this was, certainly not the common knowledge when they had to use the Hubble telescope to fine tune this cheshbon of exactly how long it takes. And you needed NASA and the German scientists to come up with that level of accuracy. Obviously, it was not any literature that was available at their times, and we had it in every single Jewish Bet Midrash and Shul across the world. People studying Masechet Rosh Hashanah Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, the exact cheshbon of 29 and a half and tashsak chalakim, down to the milliseconds of our accurate timing. Nevertheless, Rabbi Gamliel said that's why it cannot be, because it hasn't reached at that time, and therefore whatever you think you saw, you certainly didn't see the new moon. That's for sure. And he refrained from being Mekadesh the new Chodesh. Ve'oto hayom meta imo shel Ben Zuza. And here is the Ashgacha. The mother of this guy, Ben Zaza, they died, and he gave a tremendous hesped. He gave a public hesped of all-time fame, not because this woman really deserved such a hesped, but because, guess what you can't do on Rosh Chodesh? Hesped, right? So by means of going and giving a town hall hesped to this woman who didn't deserve it, he publicly said, what is the chut she had, right? Got a direct long hesped from Rabbi Gamliel, the Nasi, right? But that was his way of proving, says, who died today? Oh, this guy. I'm coming to give a hesped, right? And he gives like a town hall, long hesped for people to know that today is not Rosh Chodesh, because everyone thought today is going to be Rosh Chodesh, because everyone thought they saw the moon, and no way that's going to be Rosh Chodesh, because the time of minimum of a molat has not reached yet, so there's no way that what you think you saw was actually the moon, says the Gemara. So Imoshel Ben Zazat died. He gave a massive hesped for her. Not because she deserved it, but for people to know that Bedin is nowhere close to being Mekadesh the Chodesh today. Halach Rabbi Akiva. Now, back to our story, right? Back to the story of Rabbi Yoshua being put away in an embarrassing way to walk on Yom Kippur of his own cheshbon to Rabban Gamliel, right? So halach Rabbi Akiva u'meitzao metzer. This is what the Mishnah said. Ibaylo, they asked him Beit Midrash, mi metzer, who was upset? Rabbi Akiva was sad or Rabbi Yoshua was sad? So it says, Rabbi Akiva meser or Rabbi Yoshua meser. Tashma the Tanya, halach Rabbi Akiva u'motzao Rabbi Yoshua kashu meser. Rabbi Yoshua was depressed, he was sad. And who do you want to be visited by if you're sad? Rabbi Akiva. Akiva was we spoke about this before in the story of Leil Pesach, the story that we say every Haggadah Shel Pesach. We mentioned Rabbi Akiva is a student of all these people, right? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Tarfon, all of them were seniors. He was actually the student of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. And yet, the only person that lives in Bnei Brak is him. They all, his rabbis, his rebbeim, picked up and left and went to him to celebrate Pesach. The Seder night was by Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because this is the generation right after Churban, as we're going to discuss. And if you want to have a feeling of cherut, a feeling of positivity, you got to go to someone that is super duper positive on a steroid, and that's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the one that saw the half cup full every single time. He's the one that at the end of Masechet Rosh Hashanah sees the shu'alim coming out of the Bet Kodesh Hashem, and this was fresh scar for everyone. They've witnessed the actual destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, all tore their garments, and he's laughing, right? Everyone remembers that? And they say, well, how dare you laugh? He says, why are you crying, right? It's like, the shock is on you. I should be laughing. Why are you crying, right? He was able to be ma'apech, to look at the positive scenario everywhere. So that's him. So he comes in. Amalo, Rebbe. He tells him, my Rebbe. Why are you sad? Amalo, Akiva. He tells him, Akiva, I want you to understand the level of pain. I would have preferred to be hospitalized and immobile and mamash bed rest for 12 months, an entire year. And he wouldn't ask me to walk with my money and with my thing on the Yom Kippur of my own cheshbon. I think this is Yom Kippur. Why are you doing this to me? Right? Amaleh. So Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi, allow me to say something. Let me tell you something. You taught me. This is the way you speak to your Rebbe. Right? You say, oh, let me darshan in front of you. Right? He says, you taught me. Now, he probably didn't teach him that, but that's the way it's brought as a kavod rav or kavod kivud avayim. If you see your father is doing something that's halachically not tuned, you don't go to him with the sefer and says, oh, you missed this halakha in Shulchan Aruch. It's not derech eretz, right? You say, you remember, Abba, you once told me this halakha in Shulchan Aruch. Now, he never said that, right? But that's how you mention it as a basic level of derech eretz and kavod. So he says, can I say something that I heard from you, Rebbe? Amalo Emor says, say. And says Rabbi Akiva, Amalo, Hareu Omer, the pasuk says, Atem. Right? Otam. And we read it, Atem. Right? Ele Moadei Hashem, Mikra'el Kodesh Asher Tikro, Otam Bemoadam. Right? That's one. Then you have, Daber Bnei Yisrael, Avat Aleim, Moadei Hashem Asher Tikro, Otam, Mikra'el Kodesh Elehem Moadai. That's the second one. And afterwards you have Ele Moadei Hashem, Asher Tikro Otam Mikra'el Kodesh, La'akriv, Isher Hashem Olam Mincha Zevach Tzchachim Devar Yom Beyomo. So you have again Asher Tikreu Otam. So says Rabbi Akiva, you have Otam, Gimel Pamim, right? And we darshin as we darshin before. Al Tikri Otam Ela Atem. So what do you need? Atem. Asher Tikreu Atem. Now you will call, right? Says Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Yeshua, Atem afilu shogegin. When you call it, when the betin that is appointed to do so calls it, even if it's b'shogeg, making a mistake, afilu mezidin. Even b'mezid, if they announce it not at the time that it is, as we mentioned before, right? They would pressure the edim when needed to be like this, and you ask yourself, like, how can you do that? Because the Torah has given the reality of the Yom Tov, right, to Klal Yisrael, to the degree that Rash says the Malachim went and asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, when is the Yamim Tovim? We're setting up our schedules. Hashem said, what are you asking me? Let me and you, Hashem says, let me and you go down to Betin Shel Mata and see what they say. This is an area of halakha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given the absolute power to Klal Yisrael. By the way, there's a lot to talk about this, and we're out of time. But this is the reason that the Yevanim, again, the Hanukkah is not that far, the first thing that they banned was Chodesh. Right? They banned things very mindfully. They're not out to kill. They're very methodical. They didn't destroy the Beit HaMikdash. They used it. They didn't kill the Jews. They wanted to Hellenize them, right? So things that they banned was very, very methodically thought through. That we understand the Midah, because they believed the Olympics and all of that came from them. They believed in human bodies' perfection, right? They're the ones that erected half-naked statues of human beings with bulging muscles all over the place, and so that's them, right? So we understand why Brit Milah, and actually what it has, the debates of the Chachmei Yevanim with Chachmei Yisrael. One of them is about Brit Milah, right? If you say God created man, why would he create it imperfect, right? Because they felt it's perfect, right? Every Gezerah was like this. So why would they ban Chodesh, right? Chodesh. Shabbat, I understand. You don't want people to keep Shabbat. I understand. Milah, I understand. Why Chodesh? Who cares? Because that's how you Hellenize people. If you have authority of Torah, a live and kicking authority of Torah Sheba'al Peh, a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through living Chachmei Yisrael that will tell you, no, that's not what the Bible means by the Bible critics or whatever. That is the biggest impediment of learning Gemara, and the dedication to Torah Sheba'al Peh is the greatest impediment in that stands as a dam in front of assimilation of Klal Yisrael. That's it. And they understood that. The Yevanim understood that. But be as it may, atem afilu shogegin, atem afilu mezidin, atem afilu mut'in, even if you make a mistake. Bilshon hazeh amar lo, this is the drasha Rabbi Akiva gave him. And this is exact quotation of what Rabbi Yeshua answered to him. He said, Akiva nichamtani, nichamtani. Akiva, you comforted me. Akiva, you comforted me. We intended to finish the whole parak, but we're by 2 dots now. We will, Hashem, quickly get through the rest of the parak, and we have some amazing, great to discuss with Hashem in the next year.